Tonight, jobs, 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 and what it means for a struggling economy. Plus, tamping down. Military vaccine mandates are still in full effect, even after the president's remarks that the pandemic is over. And pot pardon. The president is pardoning federal convictions for possession of marijuana. This even as the drug reaches new levels of potency.
For me, it was detrimental, and I don't think anybody can really know if it will have that effect on them. And so it's very risky to do.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Persisting through the pandemic, vaccine mandates for the military are still in place. Welcome to Faith Nation from our studio in Washington. I'm Matt Gelka. Tonight, Pentagon leaders admit a serious recruiting crisis threatens U.S. military readiness for decades to come. Yet, hundreds of service members continue to be discharged for refusing to get the COVID-19 vaccine. A group of Republican lawmakers want answers to why the mandate remains after the president publicly declared the pandemic over. National Security Correspondent Caitlin Burke recently spoke with a Coast Guard member continuing to serve even with his job in limbo.
More than 2,500 members of the U.S. Coast Guard are on record refusing the COVID-19 vaccine. Many have been discharged, while others are still waiting on the official order. For those serving at Air Station Clearwater, Florida, they're spending the time they have left saving lives in search and rescue efforts following Hurricane Ian.
It's what I signed up to do. I have a passion for this job. I love the people I work with, and I love the impact that we have on the people we serve, on the people we help.
Chad Watson, a rescue swimmer in the U.S. Coast Guard, has served in the military for 18 years. With just 2 years left until retirement, he's now among those facing discharge.
Weighing the risk versus gain, we're taught to do that our whole career. Where the risk of getting COVID for me is very minimal. With the effects that it has and what it can do to me, versus the vaccine where it was an unknown. So going back to the risk, why would I take an unknown risk when I know that there's minimal risk on something else?
GOP lawmakers are pushing to save the jobs of people like Watson.
The nature of and the effectiveness of the vaccine has evolved. It started with absolutely it stops the spread. I think it's pretty clear now that it doesn't stop the spread. It's more of a decision on what type of symptoms you want to incur or risk in your personal capacity, making it much more of a personal health decision.
In a recent letter to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, Republicans on the House Armed Services Committee demanded answers on the status of the military's vaccine mandate. They point out that members of the armed forces are now one of only a few groups left in the executive branch still subject to termination for failure to take the vaccine. They also reference this statement from President Biden himself about the status of the pandemic.
The pandemic is over. If you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape.
So far, no movement from the military. Watson says he hopes the DoD will reverse the decision, not only for his own career, but due to the strain more discharges would put on those still serving.
In my job alone, we're understaffed by a lot. We're about 89% capacity of where we should be, and we're going to lose potentially 19 more from where we're currently at if they discharge us and release us from active duty.
Republicans say this will be a top priority if they take back the House and Senate in November. In the meantime, they wait on answers from the Pentagon. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Caitlin, thank you. The president is set to pardon criminals with federal convictions for possessing marijuana. The move, a fulfillment of a campaign promise that no one should be in jail for using or possessing the drug. The president directing the attorney general to issue certificates of pardon through an administrative process, and in a statement urging all governors to follow suit by pardoning state offenses. President Biden instructing the AG and Health and Human Services to review marijuana's current classification as a Schedule I drug, currently grouped in with the most dangerous drugs and classified as more dangerous than fentanyl and methamphetamine. The presidential pardons come even as health experts, along with former marijuana users, are both warning about the high potency of today's weed. The combination of a stronger product plus states legalizing the drug can equal a dangerous situation. As medical reporter Lori Johnson tells us, the highly concentrated marijuana is leading to greater levels of addiction and mental health disorders.
Zach Plant started using marijuana to ease the stress in his life.
Like, I would much rather be high than be sober.
Months later, he entered the hospital for cannabis-induced psychosis because his marijuana use led Zach to lose touch with reality while experiencing hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia.
I had, thoughts of other people wanting to hurt me, thoughts of the only way of, being safe was to end my own life.
While his symptoms didn't last, doctors gave Zach a warning.
If you smoke marijuana again, there's a chance that you don't come out of psychosis. You go back into it, and your brain may never recover.
Up until about 20 years ago, most marijuana contained comparatively low levels of THC, the ingredient that makes users high. Now that concentration can be 10 times greater, 30% THC, and in some cases, much more.
You can go to a gas station now where I live, and you will find a vape pen that has, we call them carts or, dab pens, and it will have like 50 times the potency of just smoking regular marijuana.
New research shows today's high-potency marijuana can be directly linked to a greater risk of mental illness and addiction.
Marijuana-induced psychosis and marijuana-induced schizophrenia is the single most well-replicated finding in schizophrenia research today.
And this super strong pot is widely available.
The legal pot shops are dedicated to selling very potent products. The only caveat to that is that the drugs on the street can have fentanyl laced in on occasion, which is obviously can be fatal.
So far, 37 states have legalized medical marijuana. In 19 of those states, recreational use is also legal. All of this rakes in billions of tax dollars for those state and local governments. Senator Chuck Schumer wants this to go national and introduced legislation in July to federally decriminalize marijuana and establish a federal cannabis tax.
We are taking steps in the Senate to right the wrongs of the failed war on drugs.
Yet many believe we need to revive this battle now more than ever.
Legalizing or promoting marijuana is not a solution. It's a nightmare.
Aubrey Adams speaks from personal experience.
While I've witnessed THC psychosis in my own son, and my husband was hearing voices after using 24% THC flower.
The two tried it when it became legal in their home state of Colorado, not knowing how powerful it had become.
The THC content is increasing on purpose. The legal marijuana industry has to addict their users. So the more potent the product, the more risk they are of becoming addicted, just like the tobacco industry did.
Indeed, the CDC estimates 1/3 of today's pot users are addicted.
Probably the majority who are using daily are addicted because they're not just using once a day. Typically, they're using several times a day.
Which can interfere with normal life.
Can't get off work without doing it. Can't go into work without doing it.
Scientists say marijuana addiction can also hamper the development of children and young adults.
And interfere with them developing careers and completing degrees and things like that.
It's been 2 years since Zach suffered from marijuana-induced psychosis, and he's doing great. He's glad to be off the drug and recommends others steer clear of it too.
For me, it was detrimental, and I don't think anybody can really know if it will have that effect on them. And so it's very risky to do.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
On to the economy. Job growth slowing somewhat for a second straight month in September. The jobs report, a key metric as federal officials continue to raise federal interest rates in an attempt to tamp down a tight labor market and combat soaring rates of inflation. The U.S. adding 263,000 jobs in September. That's more than expected and down from 315,000 in August. The unemployment rate falling to 3.5%, down from 3.7% the previous month. Now, here with us to break down those numbers is Dr. Stephen Skanke, Chief Economic Advisor at Keel Point. Steve, thanks for joining us as always tonight on Faith Nation. Good to talk to you. So today's job report, welcome news to federal officials, but is it enough to keep the Fed from continuing with the dirty work of raising interest rates to tamp down inflation?
Well, thanks, Matt. Great to be with you. The first answer is it's not enough to keep the Fed from raising their interest rate by 75 basis points, 0.75% at their November meeting. But that's also what they said they were going to do, or implied what they were going to do after their meeting last month in September. So while it's good news that labor markets are slowing and likely will slow further, and the average hourly wage rate growth has declined, still it's not enough to help the Fed achieve its goal of reducing the big gap between people looking for work and people looking to hire folks.
Now, we were talking right before we came on air, and you said there was a lot to like about the jobs report. What did you like?
Well, what I liked is that we still got positive wage growth, and albeit at a slower rate, which is good for consumers and workers. We've also got positive job growth. With all the angst about are we in a recession, are we headed toward a recession, this jobs report is great in that it shows slowing, but it's also great in that it shows companies are still hiring.
So based on the things you just mentioned and the jobs report, how aggressive do you expect the Fed to be in the next round of interest rate hikes set up for next month?
Well, I think the Fed is still going to do what they implied, and that is 0.75% increase in rates. Unless there's something just phenomenal in the September CPI report that comes out next week. And then the question is, are they going to raise rates by 0.5% at their December meeting? Again, that was implied. But we'll have a couple of CPI reports and another jobs report, another two jobs reports before the December meeting. So, I mean, they can see that the only way that they're going to deal with that gap is on the employer side, because not enough people are coming into the workplace to help supply the job vacancies. So the Fed is going to have to do what they said, and that is cut the demand.
Now, you did mention wage growth before, and we see it continue to rise, but it seems out of pace with the consumer price index and the rising price of goods. How big of a problem is that for the economy right now?
Well, it's a problem for consumers and particularly lower income groups, where the price increases have been most difficult to digest. Now, there is good news. The cost of housing is starting to come down. The prices of foods are starting to moderate and come down. Used car prices are down. Commodity prices are down. We'll see what happens to energy prices as a result of this OPEC decision announced earlier this week. But generally, that's positive. And it really looks like inflation could be well below 4.5% by the end of the year. And with job growth currently averaging about 4.5%, that helps keep consumer buying power stable.
And Christmas is right around the corner, so hopefully we get more good news for consumers. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us as always.
Thank you, Matt.
All right, well, coming up, new revelations in the case against the president's son, how that impacts the upcoming elections and beyond. Well, federal agents say they have sufficient evidence to charge the president's son, Hunter Biden, with tax crimes and a false statement related to a gun purchase. That's according to the Washington Post. The federal investigation of Hunter Biden began in 2018, centering around his taxes and his international business dealings. The probe involves Hunter Biden's work with the Ukrainian gas company Burisma when now President Biden served as vice president. So for more on this, joining us now is Julia Manchester, national politics reporter with The Hill. Julia, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you as always. We'll start here with this new developments with Hunter Biden. This decision will ultimately be made by the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, David Weiss, a Trump pick. He was kept on by President Biden. Whether or not that happens, though, does this story impact the upcoming midterms at all? I mean, the president's not on the ballot. So will this have an impact for this year and for 2024?
I think for this year, you're going to see a lot of Republican candidates talk about what they would do if they get back the House majority. We've already heard rumblings from Republicans in the House saying they would like to investigate Hunter Biden and look into that. So I think that's the extent you're really going to see this time around, because this is about the president's son, not necessarily these down ballot candidates. You know, maybe it could be extended to them, but I don't think that line of attack will be very effective. Going into 2024, however, absolutely, I think you will see that, especially in a Trump-Biden matchup. We know that their children, their elder children, have very much been involved with, business and, politics, ties to them, especially on the Trump side. And now that you have this saga really erupting with Hunter Biden, I think that will absolutely be a line of attack for any Republican running against Biden, especially Trump.
Yeah, those investigations, basically an outright promise from House Republicans with their commitment to America they rolled out. Now, speaking of the midterms, a guy who wasn't on the ballot in November is apparently going to be leaving Washington anyway. Nebraska Republican Senator Ben Sasse is expected to take a job as president of the University of Florida. Does his expected departure change anything on Capitol Hill?
I think it shows that a lot of these more establishment, moderate Republicans that aren't necessarily in line with the Trump wing of the Republican Party, they've started to leave. We've especially seen that in the House, but you're seeing it with Ben Sasse in particular. Look, for whoever is appointed to replace him and whoever, holds that seat, that could impact things on Capitol Hill. But Nebraska is a red state. I think we can expect it to be a Republican.
Julia, finally, you had an article out today about Democrats trying to make the midterms about abortion, but recent polling shows that it might not be as big of an issue as maybe the Democrats think it is. How do you see this playing out in just about a month before before the midterms here?
Look, I think Democrats are really working to use this to galvanize their own base and potentially more independent establishment, maybe swing voters in suburban areas like suburban Philadelphia, for example, suburban Las Vegas, suburban Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, these major Senate states where you see the Democratic candidates talking about abortion. I think in particular, Nevada and New Hampshire will play a very big role because we know that those two states are very pro-abortion rights, but I don't think it's going to be at the top of a voter's priority list. That is still inflation, crime, and the economy overall.
Julia Manchester, thank you so much. Good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
We'll be right back. More deaths in Florida as the devastation from Hurricane Ian is still sinking in. 123 people are now dead, and that number continues to climb. Residents are still dealing with a loss of power and devastated homes, many of which were flooded. CBN's Operation Blessing has been on the ground since the beginning, helping people recover from the onslaught of one of the most powerful storms to ever hit the state. Operation Blessing went to the home of 77-year-old Mrs. Claire Boulier in Port Charlotte. Claire believes God answered her prayers when OB showed up at her house, ready to remove any debris from fallen trees and destroyed furniture. Claire emphasized how grateful she is to Operation Blessing's partners for financially sending volunteers and staff members to her home in her time of need. Well, as you've seen, the destruction of property and impact on the people of Florida is severe. CBN's Operation Blessing is in position and ready to help those who have suffered great loss at the hand of Hurricane Ian.
Hurricane Ian tore through southwest Florida, leaving life-altering devastation in its wake. Michael evacuated from his home in Port Charlotte. When he returned, what he saw was shocking.
Think about it for a second, and then you jump into action and you start trying to figure things out. What do I do first? What do I do next? Because it's devastation is all around us.
Operation Blessing is on the ground in Port Charlotte and ready to help the community.
They might have had trees fall in their yard. Some of them have had massive flooding. We cannot do what we do without the support of our volunteers and our partners.
Paul Cross is one of Michael's neighbors, and when he heard Operation Blessing's call for volunteers, he was the first to show up.
I didn't have a whole lot of damage. Once I cleaned up what there was, I was sort of looking for a way to volunteer to help people out. And somebody came by with a flyer for Operation Blessing, and I saw in there that'd be a perfect way to help other people out.
Paul can't do it alone. Operation Blessing needs volunteers to help restore the lives of those impacted by this deadly natural disaster.
Operation Blessing is just spiritually, you guys are on time. We're so ready for you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
To help with Operation Blessing's disaster team and its relief work in Florida, please consider giving to the Relief Fund. You can call 1-800-700-7000 or text OB Crisis to 71777. For more information, you can check out the CBN website, cbn.com, or the Operation Blessing website at ob.org. They're doing good work out there. Coming up, honoring the fight for peace and democracy. This year's winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. Next. Well, finally tonight, the Norwegian Nobel Committee announced this year's winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. This year's honor went to human rights advocate Ales Bialatsky from Belarus and 2 human rights organizations, one to a Russian group called Memorial and the other to Ukraine's Center for Civil Liberties. The chair of the committee sharing the important work all winners of the prize have in common.
Together, they demonstrate the significance of civil society for peace and democracy.
Previous winners of the prestigious award include Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., and the International Committee of the Red Cross. A distinguished list indeed. Well, that does it for us. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next week.